Coming up on this Friday edition of Daybreak, South Korea, China and Japan agree that trilateral cooperation must not lose momentum in the face of deep historical and territorial issues among the three countries. The government plans to raise cigarette prices by 80% starting next year in an attempt to curb the country's high smoking rate. Plus, Korea throws its support behind US President Barack Obama's strategy to defeat the Islamic State militant group. Daybreak begins now.
Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Friday, September 12th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you're tuned in to Daybreak. Our top story this morning, senior diplomats from Korea, China and Japan holding their first high-level trilateral talks in 10 months on Thursday, agreed to boost their trilateral cooperation to improve relations strained over history and territorial rows. Our Hwang Sung-hee starts us off.
Amid deepening diplomatic friction, senior officials from Korea, China and Japan met in Seoul Thursday, seeking fresh momentum in their trilateral cooperation. Divided over historical and territorial issues, the three neighbors have not held a summit since last year and met today at Korea's request.
The Republic of Korea has made strenuous efforts to resolve such a situation, either by hosting related meetings or by suggesting various constructive alternatives, with a sense of duty to continue working toward keeping and reinforcing trilateral cooperation.
The three countries have expanded exchanges in areas such as economy, trade and culture over the past 15 years, but regional rows are hampering further growth.
At the same time, our cooperation has seen difficulties and setbacks, which affected the general atmosphere of the trilateral cooperation.
Each country's chief diplomat agreed the next trilateral meeting should be conducted at a higher level to secure further progress in their cooperation.
We did have a meeting in mind that this must be followed up by the political level for the ministers and ultimately the supreme leaders.
But despite their agreement on this, the three officials failed to shake hands on when, where and how the much-delayed summit will take place. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye is set to embark on a week-long trip next Saturday that will take her to Canada and the United States. For the first time since taking office early last year, President Park will address the UN General Assembly, where she will lay out her plan for peace and stability in Northeast Asia. The president will also attend the UN Climate Summit in New York City and outline Korea's plan to tackle climate change. In Canada, President Park will focus on bolstering economic ties on the heels of Seoul and Ottawa's recently signed free trade agreement. This will mark the first time in 15 years that a Korean leader makes a state visit to Ottawa and follows Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper's visit to Seoul in March. Now, lawmakers here in Korea are still trying to work through their very deep differences over the so-called Seoul-ho ferry bill, as pressure from the public is growing to reach common ground over the details of an investigation into the sinking. Now, Choi Sun reports.
With neither side able to stand further public criticism over the months-long political standoff stemming from a bill to probe April's ferry disaster, the floor leaders from the ruling and opposition parties resumed talks Thursday to try iron out their differences. The ruling party wanted the opposition to clearly state its position on the previous bipartisan agreement on the bill, which the opposition now says should be renegotiated with the ferry victim families. The families are demanding a stronger voice in the investigation process, but the ruling party says that would violate the judicial system. Urging the opposition to cooperate in swiftly passing a number of economic and reform-related bills, the ruling party also wants the parliamentary speaker to intervene.
As the National Assembly law states, we ask the parliamentary speaker to exercise his authority to vote on those bills.
The opposition, for its part, continues to pressure the ruling side to first address the ferry bill.
The president, the presidential office, and the ruling party must resolve the Seoul ferry bill without giving further thought. The bill to find the truth behind the ferry disaster is one that concerns all Korean people.
In a move to get parliamentary business back in order, National Assembly Speaker Chung Eui-hwa will request the House Steering Committee on Friday to set an agenda for the current regular session. The floor leaders on Friday, or by the weekend at the latest, will give it another try to reach a compromise. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
And while we're on that story, and as for who will lead the opposition going forward, the New Politics Alliance for Democracy floor leader Park Young-sun, who's been filling in after her party's co-leaders stepped down in July, says an outsider will be recruited to lead the party's reform efforts. Now, Koreans are among the heaviest smokers in the world, with just under half of all adult males regularly lighting up. And smokers in Korea have had it pretty good for years, as the cost of a pack of cigarettes is much, much lower than many other countries around the world. But that may soon change, as the government has announced the nation's first cigarette price hike in 10 years. Hwang Jie reports.
In just a couple of months, smokers in Korea may have to pay almost double what they currently do for a pack of cigarettes. While the change is being welcomed by many, it's also facing strong opposition.
I think the price hike could lessen the damage of second-hand smoke, since many of my friends say they will quit smoking if cigarette prices go up. People will reconsider buying cigarettes if they're more expensive.
When we raise cigarette prices to a level on par with other countries, we should also look at the welfare level of those countries as well. But the government's logic is way too simple, that smokers will quit smoking if tobacco prices rise.
The government announced Thursday that it will push through plans to raise the price of a pack by 2,000 won to 4,500 won, or roughly $4.30 starting next year. The aim is to cut the country's high smoking rate. Around 44% of adult males currently smoke, which is the highest among OECD member countries. Cigarette prices in Korea, however, are among the cheapest in the world, standing at just around one-third the OECD average. The price has been held steady for 10 years, but the health minister says the time for change is now.
We plan to introduce a pricing system where cigarette prices will be pegged to the nation's inflation rate. We hope this proves effective in dropping the smoking rate over the long term.
The ministry's goal is to cut the smoking rate for men to 29% by 2020. Other anti-smoking measures laid out by the government include mandatory warning images on cigarette packaging and banning retailers from posting any kind of cigarette advertisement. Before any changes take effect, they will have to be approved by the National Assembly, and with both ruling and opposition parties raising concerns that the measures will burden smokers in the low-income bracket, passage is far from a certainty right now. Hwang Jie, Arirang News.
Now, just a day after the government's announcement of the first cigarette price hike in a decade, as we just heard there, the first ever tobacco trial led by a public organisation begins on this Friday. The National Health Insurance Service is suing Korea's biggest cigarette maker, KT&G, as well as Philip Morris Korea and British American Tobacco Korea, to recover medical costs incurred due to smoking-related diseases such as lung cancer. The agency aims to prove the cause and effect relationship between cancer and smoking through its database of patients. It also plans to prove the company's have broken the law during the production process. The National Health Insurance Service filed the complaint worth some $52 million back in April. Now, it's been just over a month since the government eased regulations to boost Korea's housing market, but there are growing concerns that it comes at the cost of more heavily indebted families. Our Incheon has this report.
Household debt rose sharply in August, raising concerns that it's spiraling out of control. Housing loans jumped more than $4.5 billion in August from the previous month to $518 billion. Household debt also increased by $5.2 billion last month, inching up again after it surpassed its all-time high of $1 trillion in June. The mounting debt is seen as a result of government measures that ease limits on the amount of money people can borrow from banks when buying a home. The move is part of the expansionary policies by the economic team led by Finance Minister Jongun to induce spending and promote corporate activity. The expansionary policies were further fueled by the Bank of Korea when it cut its base rate by 0.25 percentage point last month, ending a 15-month freeze. Critics say the government's policies will actually increase household debt in the longer term and ultimately stifle domestic demand as they encourage households to rack up higher debts. Although the finance minister did not directly comment on whether the central bank should make further cuts to its base rate, Che has reiterated the importance of coordinated fiscal and monetary policies to boost government efforts to spur economic recovery. To drive his point home, the ministry pointed to lackluster on-quarter growth of 0.6% in the second quarter. Incheon, Arirang News.
Now, you may think that the recent detainment of 3 American nationals might put Westerners off travelling to North Korea. Well, you'd be wrong, because it seems the curiosity to see one of the most isolated countries in the world overrides concerns of being held in a North Korean prison. The number of European travellers in particular is on the rise. Beijing-based Goryeo Tours estimates 5,000 to 6,000 European tourists travel to the north every year. According to a pro-North Korea newspaper in Japan, foreign tourism to the north increased by 20% in the first half of this year. However, tour operators do admit the number of American tourists has dipped since 2 of their countrymen were arrested in Pyongyang in April. North Korea has been heavily promoting hiking, cycling, golfing, and even skiing trips to attract more tourists to the country. Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following on this Friday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, standing by the news centre. Good morning, Eunice.
And good morning to you, Mark. Global reaction to a coalition against Islamic State militants proposed by U.S. President Barack Obama yesterday is coming in. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry in the Middle East secured the commitments of key Arab allies to fight back the brutal Sunni insurgency by stopping the flow of cash and people and possibly joining in military action. The pledges came after a meeting of foreign ministers in the city of Jeddah. Syria and Iran, however, criticized President Obama's IS strategy for leaving them out of the international coalition. A state-run Syrian daily warned that U.S. airstrikes over its territory without the state's consent would trigger the, quote, first sparks of fire in the region. Russia's foreign ministry said such military action would constitute a flagrant violation of international law without a UN Security Council resolution. The South Korean government, meanwhile, has expressed support of the plan, a foreign ministry official saying more humanitarian support is under consideration. Last month, Seoul had announced an aid package worth $1.2 million to help Iraqis displaced by the conflict. The hustle and bustle of the New York Stock Exchange was replaced by silence at the start of the trading day Thursday, as Americans across the country remember the nearly 3,000 people killed in the terrorist attacks of 9/11 13 years ago. At the site of the World Trade Center's Twin Towers in Lower Manhattan, the names of the people killed were read out by relatives in what has become an annual ritual. A silver bell was rung to mark the times when each of the 4 planes hijacked by al-Qaeda militants crashed and the towers fell. In a private ceremony at the Pentagon, President Barack Obama honored the resilience of the surviving family members and the American people, saying that the country grows stronger despite the small, hateful minds that conspire to break their spirit. And after 6 months of dramatic testimony, the final verdict is in. South African Paralympic champion Oscar Pistorius has been cleared of all murder charges over the killing of his girlfriend, model Riva Steenkamp. Judge Thokozile Masipa of South Africa's High Court said Thursday that prosecutors failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Pistorius was guilty of premeditated murder. Masipa questioned the reliability of several witnesses and raised concerns of police contaminating the crime scene. The double amputee had shot dead his girlfriend through a bathroom door in his home on Valentine's Day last year, claiming he thought she was an intruder. Pistorius, however, could still be convicted of culpable homicide when sentencing resumes on Friday. That charge carries a jail sentence of up to 15 years. And a movement to secede from Spain is sparking in the northeastern community of Catalonia, 1 week before Scots are to go to the poll and vote on whether they would break away from the United Kingdom. Separatists in Spain said they were committed to holding a referendum on November 9th as they urged hundreds of thousands of people to protest on Thursday. Such a vote would be regarded as illegal by the Spanish government and will likely be blocked by the country's constitutional court.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Now, as with most things, cash was once king on Seoul's public transportation services and the only way to pay your fare. Those days are long gone, though, thanks to the Tmoney card, which provides millions of people in Korea with a convenient cashless method to pay for the subway, bus or their taxi rides. Well, our Kwon So-ah reports on how the technology inside these cards is evolving and winning some fans overseas.
A tough commute in Southeast Asia. This is just one of the Korea Smart Card Corporation's recent ventures into the global market. The company's prepaid transportation card, the Tmoney card, which launched 10 years ago, is already a staple for millions of commuters in Korea.
When I used to pay for my fees with cash, it was inconvenient, but not anymore since I use the Tmoney card. All I have to do is charge it.
The most convenient part of the Tmoney card is its integration system. Whether you're traveling by subway, bus, or taxi, this one card can get you where you want to go.
And it's also selling overseas. Korea Smart Card told Arirang News that Tmoney America was established in New York last month to expand its service in the U.S. The company's first service abroad in Wellington, New Zealand, has been running since 2008.
When cards are held against the Tmoney card reader there, the settlement data is sent to Korea, and those results are transferred back to New Zealand. That's remote management service through cutting-edge technology.
Since it uses NFC technology, a short-range wireless technology, the business opportunities expand beyond the scope of transportation. It makes micropayments at more than 50,000 businesses possible, including convenience stores and vending machines. Korea Smart Card says it's hoping to eventually become the world's #1 smart mobility and payment service provider and is already in talks to expand its service in another location by the end of this year. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now, dust can be a constant nuisance at home, but have you considered how dust may be having a serious toll on your health? Well, researchers in Korea believe the effects can be extremely harmful, saying the dust on our beds could be even worse for our lungs than smoking. Connie Kim reports.
This woman has been living in her apartment for more than 10 years and cleans constantly over concerns of dust.
I tend to cough a lot in dusty places, so I change my bed sheets once every 2 or 3 weeks.
Her concerns are not unwarranted and may be helping to keep her free of lung diseases. New studies conducted by local universities show that the dust in our beds can have serious effects. According to study results, the ultra-fine particles found in beds can increase the risk of asthma up to 10 times. Continued exposure can also raise the risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease by up to 8 times. And while smokers have 3 times the risk of getting lung cancer compared to non-smokers, a dusty bedroom raises the risk by up to 40 times.
If there is a continuous exposure to bed dust, airways can be narrowed and destroyed, which can eventually cause lung cancer.
Experts say the best way to reduce the threat is to change your sheets regularly and keep your bedrooms well ventilated by opening the windows from time to time. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And TGI Friday, everyone, as we kick things off with the Incheon Asian Games, which is now just 1 week away, as Korean athlete and delegation got together on Thursday for their inaugural ceremony. As a way of showing support to the athletes competing in the upcoming Asian Games, 646 members from 27 sports attended the ceremony. And their goal was simple: win at least 90 gold medals and finish second in the overall medal count for the 5th straight time. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Jongun was also on hand to give support to the athletes, stating that he hopes the athletes have great pride in representing the country and that they do their very best. Meanwhile, as the Korean U23 men's football team continue to prepare for the upcoming games, the men's senior team is quietly preparing for the upcoming October friendlies. And on Thursday, newly hired head coach Uli Stilicke finalized his coaching staff. And coaching alongside the 60-year-old German will be his assistant coach, Carlos Armoa from Argentina. But included in the coaching staff will be the interim coaches Shin Tae-yong, Park Gun-ha, and Kim Bong-soo. And while their contract was until January under former manager Hong Myung-bo, they're expected to receive an extension. And now moving over to baseball, where Korea's independent baseball team, the Goyang Wonders, have disbanded after years of trying to join the Futures League. The owner of the Wonders, Hamin, who invested around $10 million into the team, have decided to disband the team due to a lack of income. The team produced 22 pro KBO players and was led by one of the best managers in the game in Kim Sung-gun. And now staying in domestic baseball, let's jump into our Thursday night KBO action as the Samsung Lions win on a walk-off against the Kia Tigers 5-4, with the Lotte Giants being the NC Dinos 5-1, and the SK Wyverns crushed the Nexon Heroes 11-2. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the Hanwha Eagles take on the Tucson Bears. And of course, going to the game here, we go over to the bottom of the first. Kim Hyun-soo with an RBI single to right scores Chung Soo-bin as the Tucson Bears take a 1-0 lead. But second inning, Kang Kyung-hak's RBI single ties the game at 1-1 before Chung Gun-woo answers with a clutch 2-run single to right center as the Hanwha Eagles take a 3-1 lead. But a 4-1 third inning for the Tucson Bears give them a 5-3 lead before Song Kwang-min in the 4th inning, deep to right field. There it goes, a 3-run shot, and the Hanwha Eagles take the lead again 6-5. But Tucson's bat comes alive with 16 hits in this game, including Kim Hyun-soo going 3 for 3 with 3 runs scored as the Tucson Bears win a slugfest 11-6. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Well, typical early autumn weather is expected to persist throughout the day. A cool and chilly morning will turn to a summer-like afternoon with highs rising to mid to upper 20s across the nation. And we'll be under the influence of high pressure front from China, so skies should stay clear for the most of the times, but clouds could be rolling in as we go through the day. With that, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The overnight lows here in Seoul has dropped to mid-teens, starting out at 18, but the high will rise to 28, while Daegu and Gwangju will peak to 27, and Busan will hike up to 26 later in the day. Now for other regions, it looks like down on Jeju Island and Daejeon will top out at 25 and 26, while Dokdo should see highs of 23, while Mount Keungang gets up to 15. Well, big temperature difference between lows and highs will continue, so please take good care of your health to avoid catching a cold. Well, that's all for now, and let's send it back to Mark in the studio.
Thank you very much, Jeon, for the weather there. And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. Korea Today is coming up in about half an hour's time. We'll be back throughout the day with many more news updates. I'll be back with a full newscast at 10 a.m. Korea time. Until then, goodbye.